What I have here is a PC, the likes of which that I've never seen before, and you probably haven't either. This is the CLX Hathor Duo PC that is honestly a revolution in the gaming and streaming PC industry. It's not without its faults, and there's a lot of discussions to be had around it, but since I first laid eyes on this concept since TwitchCon, I have been enamored with it, and they sent me over my own personalized version with UFD Tech and SynGap Research Fund branding for me to check out. So we're going to be reviewing the CLX Hathor Duo PC, and it's something. So the concept behind the Hathor Duo PC is fantastic. It utilizes both a full gaming PC, the version they sent me over has a 13900K, 32 gigs of RAM, an RTX 4080 for the fastest performance that you could possibly get. And then on the bottom, what you have is an Intel Compute Element NUC, which Intel released years ago. Didn't really find its footing in the mainstream, but once I saw this being utilized as a secondary streaming PC in a computer that CLX had at TwitchCon, it made so much sense why you would have a second slotted in PC, because you could actually use it for a whole host of different things while you're using the main computer. And that's absolutely what it's done for me since I've gotten it. I have a recording and gaming section that's over there on the other side of the office, and I typically am using two mid-tower chassis, one to handle the streaming and recording, one to actually do the gaming on. Instead, what we have here is two full capable PCs, all in the popular Lee & Lee 011 Dynamic Evo case, which is a case that most people will only put one PC into. So you get two for the size of one, and it definitely revolutionizes the amount of space that you need to actually have a streaming PC. And CLX is the exclusive launch partner with Intel to bring this concept to market. The target audience for a PC like this is going to be those people who actually are heavily into streaming and gaming at the same time and want a simplified, complete setup, but don't want to have to go figure out how to do it themselves. And for people who are limited on desk space like I am and have been using it in my streaming setup that you can see right here. And the compute element, which is slotted into its own main board, has a whole lot of functionality because it's rocking an i9-12900. So that's 16 cores and 24 threads. It's got 16 gigabytes of its own RAM. It's got its own storage, and it has its own capture card attached to that main board so that you can output from the gaming PC into that NUC compute element and have it do all of the capturing for you. And the NUC is actually complete with its own power supply and even power button on the front. You have a PC power button and you have a NUC power button, allow you to power them on and off separately because they are two functionally independent systems. And at the back, you have a 1000-watt power supply for the main gaming PC and a 750-watt power supply handling the main board and the compute element and everything that's going on with that secondary streaming PC. But since it's a 16-core, 24-thread CPU in there, it can handle essentially everything that a regular gamer and streamer would need in their system. And especially because Intel's integrated graphics are really good at doing the encoding to get your stream out to the internet, you really don't need a whole lot more. I did find a couple instances where I wanted to install a GPU, which we'll talk about in a second, but the 12900 compute element by itself for doing a 1080p, 1440p, 60 FPS stream is actually surprisingly capable, and it brings a lot of performance benefits that you get over just trying to stream off of even what is one of the highest end PCs out there. The main PC has a 13900K, as I mentioned, and an RTX 4080. But I actually did all of my testing with my RTX 4090 to see just how big of a performance gap there could be if you stream on your gaming PC versus if you utilize something like a secondary capture PC. So I tested all of the gaming for the 13900K with the 4090 at 1440p ultra settings. And what we got for that in the games that we played for CSGO, Cyberpunk, Fortnite, Spider-Man, and The Witcher 3 are all on the screen. So we're averaging nearly 100 to 120 FPS in nearly every single game. And that's if we're doing no encoding, or if we're streaming out through the NUC, because there's no performance penalty for sending the display out to the capture card and then streaming that out. So the raw level performance is that high. But once you start streaming, it actually impacts the performance actually a surprising amount. So in a game like CSGO, because we're so CPU bound and we're already pushing 700 frames per second, we only lost about 8% performance. But in a game like Cyberpunk 2077, we dropped 25% by streaming out a 1080p 60 FPS stream at the same time as when I was playing it. For Fortnite, we lost about 11%, and Spider-Man, we lost 14%, and in The Witcher 3, we lost about 17% of our performance. So that's a big performance delta if you're trying to stream at 1080p 60. And all of this performance difference is coming because we're using the NVENC encoder that's on the RTX 4090. We're not using AV1 because that's not supported on Twitch or anywhere else, but it's also not using the main graphics engine on the graphics card. It's using something that's dedicated to streaming, but still that provides enough overhead to actually degrade some of the gaming performance, which if you're a professional gamer, you don't want to lose that FPS while you're playing the game just so that you can stream. You want to get all of the frames that you possibly can. But I also wanted to test out what would be the performance penalty if you streamed at 120 FPS. So 1080p, 120, it's becoming a thing. Twitch does officially support it. High refresh rate streaming. What is the gap there? And it's still pretty bad. CSGO, we lost 12.6%. Cyberpunk, we lost nearly 30% in performance. Fortnite was 16% worse. Spider-Man was roughly 25% worse, and The Witcher 3 was roughly 20% worse. So we lost between 3 and 11% over streaming at 1080p 60. Now, this is one of the caveats that I have with the Hathor Duo PC with the NUC. It cannot do 1080p 120 FPS streaming. The encoder on the integrated GPU cannot handle it, which is why I'm so thankful that the main board actually has a slot for a PCI Express graphics card, which I then added. I actually have a GTX 1650 lying around that I had to take the fan shroud off of because it started grinding and it was dying. So it's just been sitting around, and it's the perfect use case to put in here because it's being cooled by the fans that are at the bottom of the PC, so I don't need a fan shroud. But then I actually don't need the display out. I can still output through the NUC, but I get the added performance of the NVENC encoder, or if I want to do some video editing, I can use the CUDA acceleration, and all it has to do is sit right down here. This GPU never got hotter than 50 degrees Celsius, even when it was running at full tilt. And that's when you can actually add in 1080p 120 FPS streaming. Or you can add in features like RTX voice so that you can get a better streaming setup, because without having an NVIDIA graphics card in the streaming PC, you are a little limited in some feature sets that you could possibly use, but it is not difficult to install a single or dual slot GPU down here that can handle some of that encoding for you. The only thing that I would mention is that you cannot get the display out because there's no where to attach the PCI Express card. It's just, mine's just dangling in here. But that's one of the things that I really love about this system. There's so much versatility in what you get. You have a micro ATX motherboard that allows for the space for the second PC. The second PC can be upgraded because it has a full CPU in there. You can put more RAM. You can put up to 3 NVMe SSDs in there. You can really configure this to be a high-end PC to take care of whatever you want, and it can all fit in one singular small form factor. And it allows you to get two of the fastest PCs that you could possibly build without having to do any sort of crazy liquid cooling or having a monster case. It all fits in one of the most popular chassis out there. The space savings cannot be understated. CLX has also said that there is some power savings using the compute element versus building a PC of equivalent spec. I can't test that because I don't have a 12900, and there was no thermal issues in this. Even with the side panel on, it has enough airflow to take care of both of those PCs running at full tilt, doing everything at the same time. And it can simplify things like your desk setup because you can use software like Synergy or Mouse Without Borders. You can actually only have one keyboard and mouse setup like I currently have on my system, and you can just switch between the two PCs. You can make it a little bit more complicated if you want to add a second keyboard and mouse, or you could potentially remote into the NUC if you wanted to get that set up, but it's versatile and it can save you space if you choose to make it do that, or it could be super functional and you can go all out on two PCs with a singular setup. But now we need to get to the elephant in the room, which is the fact that this is available for purchase at clxgaming.com. CLX is a boutique PC builder that makes sure that they build your PCs to your specifications. They provide it as a pre-built, and that always comes with a price premium. But now we need to discuss what that's like. But before we get into that, I do want to remind people that there are a couple different types of people who use PCs. There are the DIY enthusiasts who will absolutely go out, spec out every single part, and then build it themselves. And then there are people on the other end of the spectrum who just want it to work as it arrives at their doorstep, which mine arrived in a gigantic wooden crate, which is fantastic. I've never gotten a wooden crate delivery before. Thank you, CLX, for making that happen. But when we look at comparing it to a DIY enthusiast who's going to build everything themselves and price everything out, the price point is a little tough to swallow, because at CLXgaming.com, you can buy one of these starting at $4,000. Which, again, I will remind you, you're getting 2 full PCs. The PC that they spec'd out for me, which included that RTX 4080 graphics card, the 13900K in the main PC, and then a 12900 in the compute element, well, as spec'd, it was $7,174. Now, I went out and looked at how much I could build all of this for myself. A 13900K with an RTX 4080, etc. That is $3,200 roughly to build that PC. Then to also buy a NUC and get the RAM, the SSD, the capture card, everything I need to make that was roughly an additional $2,000. So to put a high-end gaming PC with the NUC looks like we're spending around $5,200, which is $2,000 cheaper than what CLX is charging. They're about a 38% upcharge. But in case you're not looking to do the NUC, and instead what you want to do is build just a secondary streaming PC with the exact same specs of the compute element, it gets even a little bit worse. But you do lose a lot of the benefits here. Like, you get none of the space savings because you have to build out 2 full PCs. But that second PC with a 12900KF, a Z690, all of that is going to cost you roughly $1,100 to $1,200, which means for the 13900K gaming PC plus a 12900KF streaming PC, you're all in for about $4,400, which means that the Hathor is actually going to be a price increase of about $2,750 or a markup of 62%, which is a lot harder to swallow. But again, that comes down to the difference between DIY enthusiasts and the people who are actually going to be shopping at boutique system builders, the people who are providing a high-end experience with custom builds and making sure that everything's ready to go as soon as it arrives at your doorstep. And that's what CLX provides. And this is not necessarily for everybody, but this is for people who are taking streaming seriously, likely are using this as a major source of income, and could use a high-end gaming PC in order to help further their career. And then CLX provides things like a lifetime labor warranty. You get 1 year on the parts, but you also get free lifetime technical support on your PC. And for the people who don't want to have to do any troubleshooting themselves, that is an added benefit that I think a lot of people would actually want and could help justify the price premium. However, I do want to mention that the price of the Hathor does make sense in CLX's own ecosystem. If we take a look at buying something like their CLX Horus, which is their high-end mid-tower, you can get a 13900K with a 4080 for about $4,700, which means that there's $2,500 to get up to the Hathor. But I'll remind you, to build out the NUC itself is an additional $2,000, which means that the markup on that is only about an extra $500. So it's really, in CLX's own boutique ecosystem, a reasonably priced setup. You can also get it with fancy graphics, and they provide a whole bunch of support. They can overclock it beforehand for you and make sure it's ready to go as soon as you get it. And even though that's not who I am, and I would gladly build a PC myself, and in fact, I'd stick a 13900K in a system where it doesn't even belong, that's not everybody, and I can understand the market of people who would actually potentially even want this. I do think the markup is too high for me, but other people may not agree, and that's going to come down to personal preference and how much you value getting a customized system delivered straight to you. So price point is probably the biggest negative of this whole thing, and there are a couple of things that I would love to see tweaked in the future. Number one, all of the I/O for the compute element is at the back. These two USB ports down here and all of these USB ports up front are connected to the main PC. I would like, at least if there was more USB ports on the other leg of the PC, that I could use them so that I don't have to plug everything into the back or have to move my system every time I want to plug in a peripheral. That would save me some time and energy. Additionally, I think it would be worth it for CLX to offer a system that actually does have a low-end GTX or RTX secondary GPU down here that can handle some of the encode. Right now, they only sell it with the compute element and the capture card, not necessarily potentially even giving you that extra added benefit. I do understand why they might not functionally do it because it's complicated with not having support for the graphics card, but I'm sure they could figure it out. They're very competent. They built this whole thing. They're the exclusive launch partner with Intel. I don't think there's really much stopping that from happening. I'm very impressed with the idea of the CLX Hathor Duo. I loved it at TwitchCon. It makes a lot of sense for using the Intel compute element. I personally, as a DIY enthusiast, am a little put off by the extra price point that people would use to actually have the PC built for them, but I understand why it exists. And honestly, this, if I had to buy a streaming and gaming setup, this would be my go-to because of how simplified it is, the lack of space it takes up. That 13900K cranks in everything. The 4080, the 4090, I get all of the FPS, I can turn everything on in every single game, and I can enjoy it. And when I need to edit videos like this one, this thing doesn't break a sweat, and I can even still stream at the same time while I'm editing. I absolutely love it for my personal use case, so big thanks to CLX for sending it out, but you're gonna have to determine whether or not the price point makes sense for you if you're gonna be picking one up for yourself. And again, you can check it out at clxgaming.com. They have it available there. Let me know what you think of the implementation of the NUC compute element with the full gaming PC down below in those comments. And I'll see you in the next video, friends. Cheers.